Welcome to Pollen Weather by Pollen Wise App. I'm Landon, and it's Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. This is your place for daily airborne allergen updates. Today we've got a Godzilla dust cloud coming in from the Sahara Desert. But first, let's start with the forecasted pollen highs. High pollen levels are persisting in Georgia, Arizona, Seattle, and central Utah. And while we do have green and yellow conditions in the south and southeast, as well as forecasted green conditions in the Washington, D.C. area, for most of the rest of the country, we're forecasting higher conditions for today than we did yesterday. Taking a look at mold forecasts for today, central Utah, central Ohio, Arizona, and Monterrey, Mexico are some of the worst places for mold today. Remember, for many of you, mold doesn't follow the same clockwork seasonality you would see from your trees, your weeds, and your grasses. Mold needs a little bit of moisture, and then it needs a dry period to produce the fruiting bodies that release the mold spores. So for some of you, you'll battle mold off and on year-round. Let's move on to the precipitation map overlaid over the top of forecasted highs for pollen. Much of the eastern half of the United States is going to see precipitation today. That storm front in Texas is still there, as is the storm that is moving through the Midwest, has kind of moved out into Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. That precipitation will definitely reduce your mold and pollen levels, and as we forecasted, for example, high mold in Ohio today, if that precipitation happens in your area, you can bet that it will depress those levels, at least temporarily. Let's look at the wind map. Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and parts of eastern Texas are your windy spots for the country, so remember, wind can bring pollen and mold up off the ground, and that can cause levels to spike. Over in air quality in general, and this is particulate matter, for those of you who suffer from asthma, this is a very important thing to keep track of. It's fire season in the west, and the southwest is experiencing fires in the southern half of the San Joaquin Valley. Other fires are dotting the west, and anytime you've got a fire, you're going to be dealing with air quality issues. Speaking of air quality issues, let's talk about this dust cloud coming from the Sahara Desert. They're calling it the Godzilla dust cloud, and this is the biggest in 50 years or more. Every year, a dust storm from the northern Sahara blows across the Atlantic Ocean and into our region. Now, a lot of times it's going to blow over the top of the Amazon, and actually it turns out the Amazon gets a lot of its fertilizer from the air. It blows in from the African continent. But this dust storm is headed directly for the Gulf of Mexico. Yesterday it blew over the top of Puerto Rico and Jamaica, and air quality conditions got bad quickly. We can expect this in the Gulf of Mexico as well. Houston is going to be squarely hit by this around 10 p.m. tonight. At least that's what the last forecast showed. So what do you need to know about this? Air quality is going to suffer dramatically. Shut your windows. Try to stay inside while this is blowing through. It's going to swirl up over Texas and then arc back down into the rest of the south and maybe even swirl back into Florida. While this is blowing through, you can expect poor air conditions, so exercise outdoors is probably a bad idea. Here's the cool thing. With the Pollen Wise network of sensors, our pollen sensors, we will be the first to be able to see whether or not there's pollen and mold blowing in from this storm. If you want to follow it live, set your app to Houston around 10 p.m. Central Time tonight, and you can follow the fun. Otherwise, we'll report on this tomorrow, and hopefully we'll see some interesting things. I just want to stress for those of you in that region, this is the only place for alerts for pollen and mold that come across the ocean that may affect your health. So check the Pollen Wise app. Let's end on the forecasted temperature highs for today. Going to be a nice seasonal day for most of the country. If the pollen isn't bugging you, if the mold isn't bugging you, get out and enjoy the day. And remember to check the Pollen Wise app before you do.